We're going to talk about Arbortext content delivery. How do you distribute your content? And we'll go through all the different ways in which we can organize and prepare, author, and eventually deliver that content. I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. I'm the Business Development Manager for the Arbortext Content Delivery Solution within the Arbortext Business Unit at PTC. I have 23 years of engineering, manufacturing, and service experience and 14 years at PTC. So before we get into delivering content, I'd like to understand, or at least give guidance on how content can be created, managed, and eventually delivered. So with the portfolio of Arbortext Business Unit applications, we have an end-to-end process where we can create content, we can manage and version control that content, and ultimately deliver the content for different distribution methods. So when we're creating our content, we have Arbortext Editor and Styler, where we can create our rich topic-based XML, and we can then consume information that we've created using various different illustration tools as well. Creo Illustrate can consume 3D content that you may have visualization from various different 3D platforms, including a Creo Parametric. But if you have other supplier-based content that you're receiving in other formats, we can go ahead and consume that as well. IsoDraw is a great application for vector-based drawing and illustrations. It can also bring in 3D, and then you can create your 2D layouts and add in your appropriate callouts and explode your parts. And if you have legacy information, such as raster graphics or vectorized PDF graphics, IsoDraw is a great application to bring that in. All of the preparation and creation of that content can be managed inside of Windchill Service Information Manager, where we can go ahead and build out the organization of that content based off of our product groups or product containers. In addition, when we're working with content, there may be a need for translation. So if we're building our content and we've got our rich-based XML and we want to have different languages, we can go ahead and do the translation management within Service Information Manager, where we can send out the packages for translation to our translation vendor that you have at your choice, and then you can bring that information back in. When we're working with content, sometimes your content may be parts-driven, right? You may have content that is just technical documentation-driven. If you have parts or engineering information and that you want to go ahead and use that, we have something called Windchill Service Parts that allows you to bring in your bills of material and derive that from engineering content. The transformation of that information from engineering bills of material to service bills of material and eventually the parts list is part of that authoring process. And eventually you may want to add parts lists to your technical information through your XML, or you may want to have a driven parts list that eventually becomes a PDF or HTML. Now, all of this information can be transformed and published through the Arbortext publishing engine. Ultimately, we can then deliver that out to different output formats. Arbortext Technical Content Delivery consumes output data from Arbortext publishing engine, and it allows us to then interact with that content. And we're going to look at Arbortext Technical Content Delivery, or formerly in-service, in a little more detail. So what do we have in terms of the content that we're talking about in terms of distributing? Well, when we're building content, you have different formats. You may need to go out as PDF. You may need to go out as XML. You may have a very specific type of XML that you want to go out as. And in that case, you would want to use an XSL transformation for that style sheet to then output to the format that your delivery solution, if it happens to be online, you can then go ahead and consume that. Now, Editor as a desktop application also has a number of different options for which we can output for PDF, HTML, PostScript, and EPUB types of content. So repurposing the same information for many different distribution models. Now, we were talking earlier about the Windchill Service Information Manager and Service Parts, and this is a application that allows you to manage your content, and the information can be version controlled, you can have workflow, and ultimately what you're doing is you're consolidating and centralizing all of that information into one place for your authors to go ahead and work with and collaborate on. The ability for that content to then be repurposed and then distributed for various different means. Service Information Manager specifically has the ability to organize that content into a structure that makes the most sense. You might be authoring content that's specific to maybe a pharmaceutical industry or a legal industry or a municipality, or you might be working with data that's related to a manufactured product. In either case, you can organize the information in such a way that it makes the most sense to your technical authors of that content. In this example, we have to be working on a manufactured product, and in this case, it's a four-wheel drive wheel loader. And based off of the areas or systems, we organize the data appropriately. If we were looking at, say, a municipality, and you have various different areas of, say, a transportation group, you've got a bus division, you've got the depots, you've got a rail line, you have all of these different things that need to be managed, you could do that same sort of structure inside of Service Information Manager. We also have the ability to look at the released work, information that's being worked on, it hasn't been released. You can set up options and variants, various different configurations as well. Now, in addition to Service Information Manager, we have Service Parts. Now, as I said, you may or may not have a manufactured product that would take advantage of parts. If you do, Service Parts information allows us to transform bills of material with visualization that eventually gives us the ability to create parts list with the included illustration that you can author in Creo Illustrate or IsoDraw, and eventually deliver that output to a PDF book. Or you could send it out as HTML, you could send it out as XML, and you could send that to, for example, to the Arbortext content delivery solution. So that brings me to the delivery solution that I was talking about. Arbortext content delivery is the solution for which it was formerly in Service, and we're just changing the name. It's still the great application for delivering your technical content. And that content is information that could be parts, it could be XML, it could be PDF. And we've added lots of tools for which your administrators can configure the application as well as load data into the application. From the end user perspective, that application allows us to search across all of the information inside of the system. That includes the PDFs as well as the XML and the appropriate parts lists. Arbortext Editor is your desktop application that integrates into Windchill Service Information Manager that allows us to build this very rich, structured content within the application. And you can reuse that information based off of the different tags that we associate to that content within the XML. So increasing our productivity from an authoring perspective, you author it once and you can repurpose it for the future. And we also have the standard. So when we have a standard and we have the style that we want to define on that standard for that various tag, you can go ahead and use the Arbortext Dialer to identify how you would like something to look with one style, and it goes across all of the information. We also have the publishing engine. So how do we get the data out? So we've got editor, and you put that into Windshield Service Information Manager, and then we can choose how we want to go ahead and output the data. So we go out as the XML, PDF, and HTML. Creo Illustrate, excellent application for creating your content and eventually delivering it. Now, Creo Illustrate has the ability to output data in a PVZ format from the 3D content, and that allows you to use that illustration for illustrations of a parts list. You could also create your sequences and animations for describing the complex procedures that is needed to work on machinery. In addition, this same content can be used in an augmented reality experience. So that brings us to the connected devices and augmented reality for service or delivery of content. All of the great applications we've been talking about in terms of Creo Illustrate and looking at Windshield Service Information Manager and then delivering out through Arbortext Publishing Engine, you can use that same information, that same 3D content in Foreo Studio and author an augmented reality experience. In this example, we can see that we have created some content in the Foreo Studio, and we're consuming content that was created in Creo Illustrate, and then it passes through and is stored within Service Information Manager, published out through Publishing Engine to the PTC Arbortext Content Delivery Solution, and we can use that same information using a ThingWorx connector, and we can distribute that through a ThingWorx Mashup, or we can go ahead and ask for that same content to be used in an augmented reality experience. For example, this is a ski that goes on a snowmobile, and we've got the same parts listed inside of the PTC Arbortext Content Delivery Solution, and it's the same one that's being viewed in a ThingWorx Mashup, and it's the same one that can be asked or retrieved through the augmented reality experience. So here's an example of that content. Here's the Foreo Studio, which is the authoring application. You can see that I've got the full snowmobile here in this example. The way that the AR experience works is that you can augment that 3D content on top of the real ski. So in this AR experience, this ski, the black part, is actually physically on the table. The blue parts and all the hardware and the spindle and all of the suspension is what is being augmented. And this is a great way to distribute, examples of your procedures. So we could use Creo Illustrate to create that procedure documentation. The steps that you see written here could be authored as your XML in Editor, and your exploded parts list could be something that you're also creating within your service parts and your parts list, and blending all this stuff together in your AR experience. In addition, don't forget, you may still have technical documentation that is your legacy PDFs, and you want to still display that in an AR experience. And this is where we're bring all of that information together in one easy-to-understand area for that end user to be able to interact with. Here's another example. This is a ThingWorx Mashup. It is part of the connector for the Arbortext Content Delivery Solution, and we can interact with the parts list as well as the technical content within that ThingWorx Mashup. So I'm going to jump over to the Arbortext Content Delivery Solution. We'll change screens here, and we'll look at the application and its general navigation to the content. So when we look at content, we organize our information based off of the product or category in which I want to look for. In this example, I have my content organized based off of different types of products or groups. I have a transit authority, and I have all the different areas of the transit authority and their facilities, their rail systems, subway, train, bus, and so on. And we can navigate down into the different categories. This municipality is responsible for various different models of buses, and they have the city bus, the highway coach, and the school bus. And if I dive right into that city bus, we can see that I've organized the information for the delivery, and this was done in Service Information Manager. And I have the ability to see what we call an information structure. And an information structure makes it easy for somebody to navigate. So what you author and manage in Windshield Service Information Manager is what we see directly inside of the Arbortext Content Delivery Solution. Now, if I want, we can start searching right from here. We can say that, I'm looking for something related to the brake system, and we'll navigate directly in. Inside of the Content Delivery Solution, we can search across all kinds of different content. This includes parts lists, service information, or in this case, technical documents that could be PDFs as well as XML. We also can look for media. Media could be audio files or video files that have been loaded into the application. Now, if I want, we can further refine the results. If we want to, we can look at only the service information, the technical documents that are in here. And if I dive right into this document here, brakes and wheels, it opens up that document. Now, this is a great example of some legacy content. We've already authored this document many years ago, but I still want to repurpose it and bring it in for delivery. I don't want to re-author it in XML. I already have it. I'm never going to change it. It's currently a PDF. By delivering it inside of Arbortext Content Delivery, we can see that it is fully searchable. All of the words, in this case, I looked up the word brake, and we can see that it's highlighted everywhere within this document for me to be able to find. In addition, we can navigate across the document to different pages within this document. If we look at the bottom right-hand corner, it's actually 37 pages in length, and I'm queuing up 5 pages at a time. Now, Arbortext Content Delivery indexes all of the words. When I'm searching, it knows exactly which page it finds that word on it, making the process of navigating very efficient and easy to work with. If I go back to brakes and I go back to the search, and we look at the service information again, and I look at things like the parking brake installation, we can get a quick preview of that information prior to actually opening up the document that we want to view. I'm going to select on that install. We can see that not only did the PDF highlight the word brake, but also the XML that was written and authored in Arbortext Editor and then published out to Arbortext Content Delivery. So if you're authoring something in your XML, you have authored something and wanted to publish in PDF, that's all fully indexed, and we can find that information. So if I go back to the search, we also can see that I have some parts lists. And we can look at a quick preview of the parts list, and we can see the illustration. Yep, that's exactly what I want to look for. Let's go ahead and open that up. So now, not only do we deliver the technical information or the content for distribution, we have a parts list, and we can go ahead and interact with that content. Now, interacting with that information, we can select inside of the parts list, and we can see that it's highlighting the parts. We can select on the parts as well, and it interacts with the list. Now, this is 3D, so I can go ahead and spin that model, right? We can interact with it. I can zoom in, right? We can pan that model. We can select on all the parts, right? Making it easy to navigate. Now, we also continue to have traditional 2D graphics that are also interactive. So this is an SVG, a vector graphic that I can go ahead and interact with. 3D, 2D, vector, or raster are fully supported. Let's go to an example here where I'm looking for a hydraulic. Now, inside the content delivery solution, when I search for information, I can search on partial words, and it will then give me suggestions. So I'm going to look up the word hydraulic. And this example shows me that I have lots of different results. And one of the results is a parts list that I want to navigate to. And this part is the hydraulic fluid reservoir. And this is great. I could add that directly to my shopping cart, or I could go to the parts list that is specific to that. So this is the part, and then this one here is telling me that this is the parts list. So let's go directly to that parts list. Now this is an example of 2D legacy content that I brought into Arbortext IsoDraw, and I added callouts to make it interactive. Prior to this, it was just a regular raster graphic, and I needed to add some interaction to it. So I did this in IsoDraw, and ultimately you can see the value of its delivery. We also have multiple pages. So when delivering this list, you may have multiple pages and you can't fit everything into one illustration. Well, how do you deliver that? Well, this is the ability to have multiple pages and tell the authoring system, which is Service Information Manager and Service Parts, that I have multiple pages. So depending on the item in the list, it might be a different page, and it automatically will then navigate that user to the appropriate page. Now sometimes you're going to have things like multiple parts that are essentially form, fit, and function are the same, but when we deliver it, we may want to give the user the ability to make choices. For example, this hydraulic fluid reservoir has different filters. One is the high performance and the other is the standard performance. Now, to make sure that the user has the right information, we may want to go in and identify that this is the high performance filter that I want. What happens in the delivery is when we apply this filter, we can see that only one of the parts is now displayed. The same thing is true for our spring, and the spring is related to a serial number. So if I put in the bus number here, and we say it's bus 06, we can see that now I only have one spring for that reservoir. Okay? So filtering the content based off of the delivery, and ultimately the authoring of this is done in Service Information Manager, applying what we call applicability. So how do you deliver this information so that it interacts for the user? That's the key. All right. So let's take a look at some other examples here where we are filtering content in a list, but what happens if I want to have something happen to the illustration? Well, I'm going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to navigate to one of my favorite products, which is this snowmobile. And in this example, we have the steering of this snowmobile. And if we go into the ski assembly that we saw earlier when I was showing some presentation material, we can see in this example that we have all of the parts in here. Now, we have many different toes in this one, and we have all of them listed here, and they all have different colors. Now, I'm going to use the same filter option to choose the color. This time, I'm going to choose Indie Red. That looks like a good color. So when I apply this, not only will we filter the list on the right-hand side, but it's also going to interact with the illustration so that it only shows the parts that I have identified as the option for me to look up. Another unique way in which we're delivering our content. And then ultimately, when we author the content and identify not only for the part in the parts list, but the part as well is identified in the illustration. So another unique way of delivering and distributing this content so that the user ultimately is finding the right information at the right time, and they're reducing that time to finding and identifying parts. All right. So let's take a look at some other examples here. If we have some other information such as service content, we may end up with a ski assembly for service. So a traditional XML, and then we've got some illustrations here of raster content. Now, what happens if I want to create a PVZ with an animation using Creo Illustrate, and we want to look at that content, right? Well, we could send it out as traditional owner's manuals or maintenance manuals as we do now, or let's take a look at an alternative, which is indicating that we want the service content. So let's do that. All right. So here's the service and procedures. And in this XML, we have the appropriate images and interaction where we can look at the different graphics inside of here and the steps and procedures that go along with that. Okay. Or we could go to something a little bit different than that. We could go to the sequence for this content. So if I want to change a windshield, maybe we want to do that, and then we're going to pull in this full PVZ of the snowmobile. It's fully interactive. We can spin around and zoom in and look at all of this good stuff. I'm going to take a look at the windshield, and maybe I've created a procedure, and another way of communicating would be using an animation. So I've got the tool, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out these plugs, and we can see that we are pulling all 4 of them away. As this is animating, I can go ahead and zoom in and see that we're going to pull back the windshield, put in a new one, and then push the pins back in. So again, another way to distribute your different authored content. So we've looked at PDFs, we've looked at XML, we've looked at XML with raster graphics, with 3D graphics, and now we've looked at creating sequences or steps or procedures or animations that we can interact with as well. Now, sometimes you have some legacy content. And in this example, maybe we're looking at the bus, and we've got a brake problem, as we mentioned before, and I'm going to go look at media. And you may have some traditional videos, right? So Arbortext Content Delivery has the ability to deliver all kinds of different content for the consumption of your users. This could be in the form that is product-based, as we've been looking at, or it could be just technical literature, technical documentation, right? Owner's manuals, maintenance manuals. It could be, you know, marketing documentation, all of which you can deliver inside of this solution. So let's take a look, just a quick review here, and let's go back to the first slide, and we'll see the end-to-end process where we created content using Editor, Dialer, Creo Illustrate, and IsoDraw, as well as legacy content. We managed it inside of Service Information Manager, and ultimately we then distributed this information out to through Arbortext Publishing Engine and out to the Arbortext delivery solution.